All these tales that will now be told have in some way or another happened. So let's listen and realize that there's more in this world than meets the eye. The Haunting of Maytown. In the remote wilderness of far north Queensland lies Maytown, a place steeped in history. Once a bustling gold mining town in the 1800s, it now stands as a ghostly reminder of a bygone era. As a professional paranormal investigator based in Cairns, Australia, I often travel the country in search of mysterious phenomena, and Maytown had long piqued my curiosity. The first glimmer of gold was discovered in 1873 by a prospector named James Venture Mulligan. News of this find quickly spread, attracting thousands of fortune seekers from all corners of the country. However, the harsh and unforgiving land didn't yield its treasure easily, and many miners met their demise in pursuit of wealth and a better life. Today, only scattered remnants remain of what was once a thriving community. Modern-day Maytown has an unsettling aura about it. Walking down its main street, one can't help but feel the gaze of unseen eyes following their every move. It's a place where you sense that you don't belong and are unwelcome. The following are my case notes from an investigation I conducted in Maytown in October 2006. As I prepared to venture into the heart of Maytown, a mile away from my base camp, a sense of unease washed over me. Being alone in such a remote location had put me on edge, but I was determined to carry out my mission. My plan was to leave a digital audio recorder at the base camp to capture any unusual sounds during my absence. Equipment checks are routine before any investigation, and I had completed mine without any issues. Yet, as I attempted to take some photos before setting out, my camera inexplicably malfunctioned. Frustration welled up within me as I attempted to troubleshoot the issue. Little did I know that my audio recorder had been silently recording everything, including my growing irritation. At 11:02 p.m., a chilling voice of unknown origin forcefully exclaimed, "We're not happy, no photo." In that very moment, my camera was knocked from my grasp, and I was struck with a force that sent me sprawling to the ground. My initial instinct was to get back on my feet, but I soon realized I couldn't. I had been injured and could only lie there, helpless. It would be 2 long days before the rescue team arrived. They found me by the river, seeking shelter under a paper bark tree. I was rushed to the Cairns Base Hospital upon my return, racked with pain. X-rays revealed 3 exploded discs in my lower back. But when questioned about how it had occurred, I had no answers to provide. Maytown's mysteries had taken a toll on me, both physically and emotionally. It was an investigation that left me with more questions than answers. A place where the paranormal seemed to merge with reality in the most unsettling of ways. In this eerie tale, we delve into the mysteries of a small, deserted town known as Old Aura. While I've mentioned this town in a previous story, I've only scratched the surface of its supernatural secrets. Today, I'll recount some of the spine-chilling encounters that took place in and around its decaying buildings. Let's begin with the old furniture store. A few weeks ago, my cousin Sean and I embarked on a ghost hunting adventure, exploring the forsaken corners of this forgotten town. We parked our car in front of the dilapidated furniture store. Although the top floor was far too precarious to enter, we decided to explore the basement instead, hoping to make contact with any lingering spirits. As we entered the basement, an instant chill enveloped us. While walking through the dimly lit space, I suddenly felt a tug at my waist. I glanced around, thinking Sean might be playing a prank, but he was on the opposite side of the room. Astonishingly, my wallet chain had lifted into the air before falling back into place. Excitedly, I shared this experience with Sean. Undeterred, we decided to ascend creaky stairs to the first floor. As soon as I reached the top, Sean exclaimed and rushed towards the back of the room. He claimed to have seen a shadowy figure that disappeared as he approached. We searched the room thoroughly, but there was no sign of anyone or anything. Adjacent to the furniture store was another locked-up building. We playfully knocked on the wooden boards covering its windows, jokingly asking, "Anybody home?" To our astonishment, something knocked back in response. This left us baffled, as this building had been securely locked since the town's abandonment, making it improbable for anyone to access. Now, let's move on to the train station. Its top floor had succumbed to rot, rendering it inaccessible. We carefully descended the tilted, precarious stairs leading to the basement. Upon arrival, we were met with a floor buried beneath heaps of debris. While I perched on an old mattress, gazing up at the gaping hole where the first floor used to be, we heard faint footsteps approaching. Gradually, they grew louder, but there was no visible source. An old magazine materialized and dropped at my feet from the very hole in the ceiling, where no one could have been standing. As the magazine settled at my feet, an eerie silence engulfed us. But then, from the depths of the abandoned basement, we heard it again. The unmistakable sound of knocking. The same knocking that had greeted us earlier when we playfully knocked on the window boards. Our hearts raced as we exchanged puzzled and fearful glance. And so, that concludes some of the unexplainable occurrences in the old town of Ora. I hope you found these encounters as intriguing as we did. Remember, stay safe, and may your encounters with the supernatural be filled with curiosity and wonder. I want to share an eerie experience from my teenage years. Before I begin, please remember that my intention is not to seek attention or discredit my story based on my age. This account is entirely true, and I hope you find it as intriguing as any story you've come across online. I grew up in a deeply religious household, particularly with a mother who firmly believed that ghosts were non-existent, attributing any paranormal occurrences to demonic activity. Despite this, I had always felt sensitive to the supernatural, and I wonder if I could have become a medium had my sensitivity not been stifled. My childhood was marked by recurring dreams of a sinister figure in my bedroom wall. These vivid dreams recurred every Sunday night, featuring a forest with yellow birds in the trees, which transformed into two menacing yellow eyes. A woman dressed in black with yellow eyes would then appear, mocking me with a cruel laugh, leaving me to wake up in terror. As I grew older, an irrational fear developed of the corners of my room where the walls met the ceiling. It was during this time that I began hearing mysterious whispers calling my name in hushed tones. I still hear these whispers today, although they no longer frighten me. But I'll save the stories of my childhood for another time. Now, let me recount an inexplicable encounter when I was around 14 years old. My family decided to visit my grandparents in Phoenix, Arizona. My mom thought it would be a great opportunity to explore some ghost towns for historical insight. We set off for Flagstaff and eventually reached a ghost town called Vulture Rock or Vulture City, which was once a bustling gold mine. The atmosphere at Vulture City was undeniably eerie, with its abandoned buildings and desolate surroundings. I was accompanied by my three younger brothers, Sean, Mike, and Aaron. While Sean and I felt uneasy, Mike and Aaron didn't seem as bothered. We arrived at around 9 a.m. in late November, and our exploration began. The town was laid out in a specific order. First, we visited the owner's office before proceeding down a dirt road to explore the rest of the town. It was clear that this place had been a significant mining hub in its heyday, responsible for producing a substantial portion of the United States gold and silver during World War II. However, when the war broke out, the miners left for the front lines, and none returned. Our first stop was the original mine shaft, which descended into the earth at a steep angle for half a mile. As we approached it, an odd sensation washed over me, as if I were moving through thick water. It was challenging to walk, and I felt both drawn to and repelled by the ominous hole. Cian shared my discomfort, and we quickly decided to leave and explore the glory hole instead. The glory hole was an area linked to a tragic incident. Stealing gold from the mines was punishable by hanging, and this location held a grim history. It was here that 9 men attempted to extract gold ore secretly from the support pillars, weakening them until the entire mine collapsed, burying the miners and their 11 donkeys. The bodies were never recovered. As Cian and I stood near the edge of this dark history, something unusual occurred. Cian suddenly pointed and gasped in astonishment. Following his gaze, I glimpsed a whitish figure out of the corner of my eye, but it vanished almost instantly. We wasted no time and left the area promptly, all the more unsettled by the inexplicable event. It's essential to note that it was a clear Arizona morning, with no fog or atmospheric anomalies to explain the sighting. Our next stop was the town itself, where we encountered no strange occurrences. Then we ventured to the Hanging Tree, an ancient ironwood tree where, according to legend, 18 men were hanged for stealing gold. In reality, it was likely only a few men who faced execution, mostly for crimes like rape or murder. As my younger brother Aaron and I stood under the tree, something disturbing transpired. Aaron suddenly clutched his chest, gasping for breath, claiming that something was pressing down on him. In a panic, I pulled him away from the tree. Keep in mind that Aaron was just 8 years old and not prone to making up stories. We reported the incident to our mother, but she brushed it off, assuming it was a childish prank. Despite these unsettling events, our mother insisted that we explore the remainder of the town before leaving. However, my brothers and I were eager to put Vulture Rock behind us as the unease lingered. Our final stop was an area used for refining gold ore, filled with an array of discarded machinery and equipment. As I examined some old tools, a strange incident occurred. I heard the sound of a board creaking, which initially seemed unremarkable. But as I looked up, I realized that there was no logical reason for the board to be moving. There was no wind on that still day. The board swung back and forth, pausing before moving again, almost as if it had a mind of its own. My brother Sean was underneath it, and he, too, was alarmed. Suddenly, the board was ripped from the wall, hovered momentarily, and then crashed to the ground with an unnatural force. Sean narrowly avoided being hit, and we exchanged horrified glances. We considered informing our mother, but ultimately, we feared she would dismiss our account. Moments later, I felt a gentle tug on my jacket, as if someone were trying to get my attention. I initially scolded Aaron, thinking he was playing a prank. However, Aaron, startled, popped his head around the corner, denying any involvement. Confused and anxious, I watched as my jacket was tugged again, this time with more force. Despite no visible hand, my scream pierced the still air, and we left Vulture Rock, our minds filled with inexplicable events we struggled to comprehend. In the year 1600, Edward, a blacksmith of unwavering faith, embarked on a journey with his 2 sons, Jacob and Gabriel, seeking respite from the haunting memories of a tragic incident that had claimed the life of Edward's beloved wife. Their destination was a secluded village nestled deep within the heart of the English countryside. This village was not like any other. It was shrouded in mystery, whispered about in hushed tones by those who had heard tales of its peculiarities. As they traversed the winding road leading to their new home, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across their path. The uncertainty of their new life weighed heavily on their hearts, but their faith in God was a beacon of hope that guided them forward. The village, hidden amidst dense forests, welcomed them with an unsettling silence. The big log cabin, once inhabited by Edward's late uncle, became their new sanctuary. Little did they know that the uncle had taken his own life just a week before Edward's wife had tragically passed away. The eerie quiet of the village descended upon them like a shroud, and whispers of unsettling tales lingered in the air. Yet Edward and his sons pressed on, determined to build a new life. What they couldn't have foreseen was that the villagers were harboring a dark secret. A secret that would soon entwine their lives with the supernatural. During their initial weeks in the village, they encountered increasingly strange phenomena. Flickering shadows danced on the walls, eerie whispers echoed through the night, and glimpses of elusive figures darting through the darkness became a common occurrence. These unsettling events, though unnerving, were dismissed as mere products of their imagination. Still, they continued to pray before every meal, seeking divine protection from the unseen forces that seemed to haunt the village. Edward's attempts to engage with the villagers in conversation were met with cryptic responses. The townsfolk were slow to understand, their words laden with hidden meanings. Undeterred, Edward shared his unwavering faith, speaking passionately of God's grace and the power of prayer in the hopes of finding common ground. Jacob, the elder son, became infatuated with a mysterious girl he met at the village's food market. Her name was Abigail, and like the rest of the villagers, she was reticent and slow to engage in conversation. Jacob, however, was persistent. He visited the market daily, engaging in awkward conversations punctuated by shared smiles. One evening, Jacob finally mustered the courage to ask his father for permission to see Abigail and her family. Edward, recognizing his son's growing affection, granted his blessing with a fatherly smile. Jacob's heart soared as he embarked on this newfound connection, unaware of the horrors that lay ahead. As Jacob continued to visit Abigail, their bond deepened. One fateful evening, as they shared a meal at her modest home, Abigail casually dropped a chilling revelation. The meat they were consuming was none other than the flesh of Edward's late uncle. Jacob's shock and horror knew no bounds, and he fled her house in disbelief. Returning home, Jacob tried to convey the grotesque truth to his father, but Edward dismissed it as a product of his son's imagination, believing that grief had clouded Jacob's judgment. Their relationship strained under the weight of this unspoken secret, as Jacob grappled with the knowledge that he had unwittingly consumed the remains of his late uncle. 2 weeks passed since Jacob's failed attempt to convince his father of the horrifying truth about the flesh he'd consumed. During this time, Jacob lived in a constant state of fear and paranoia. His father, Edward, began to grow concerned about his son's mental state. He attributed Jacob's distress to the absence of a church in the village, believing that the lack of spiritual guidance was taking a toll on his son's psyche. As the days turned into weeks, the village grew increasingly darker. Strange occurrences became more frequent, and the villagers themselves seemed to be slipping deeper into madness. Even some animals, like the once docile cows, had turned wild and unpredictable. They roamed the village outskirts, their eyes filled with an unsettling, primal aggression. The nights were the worst for Jacob. He couldn't shake the feeling that malevolent forces lurked in the shadows, watching him with malevolent intent. Sleep came fitfully, and his dreams were filled with haunting visions of his uncle's spectral visage, accusing him of his unwitting cannibalism. One somber afternoon, with ominous clouds looming overhead, the family ventured to the butcher's shop. Edward's intent was clear. He aimed to dispel the fears that had haunted his son, Jacob, and put an end to the unsettling rumors. When they opened the squeaking door to the butcher's shop, they laid eyes to all the different cuts at display, and a large man, appearing to be a traveling merchant. The butcher, a surly man with a grizzled beard and a cold demeanor, welcomed them with a mere nod. Edward, determined to seek the truth, inquired about the origins of the meat on display. The butcher responded with cryptic words, his voice laden with an unsettling undertone. As Edward and the butcher engaged in conversation, Gabriel, the youngest of the family, curiously approached the counter. Without asking for permission, his tiny fingers brushed against one of the cuts of meat. The moment his hand made contact, the butcher's eyes flared with fury. In a shocking turn of events, the butcher reacted with sudden and brutal violence. In a fit of uncontrollable rage, he drew a gleaming blade from beneath the counter and swiftly slit Gabriel's throat. The family's world crumbled in an instant as their beloved youngest son fell to the floor, gasping for breath, crimson lifeblood staining the wooden floorboards. Edward, overcome with grief shock and rage, watched in disbelief as his precious son lay dying before him. In a desperate bid to protect the remaining members of his family, he seized a nearby tool, a heavy cleaver used for meat preparation. Without hesitation, he lunged at the murderous butcher, his eyes ablaze with fury. As the butcher's lifeblood flowed onto the shop's floor, the once quiet butcher shop transformed into a gruesome battleground. The echoes of their struggle reverberated through the air, carrying with them a chilling sense of dread. Panic swept through the village as word Gabriel's death spread like wildfire. The villagers, gripped by an inexplicable madness, began to chase after Edward and Jacob, who'd been present at the butchery. The once silent town erupted into a cacophony of eerie cries and frenzied footsteps. Edward and Jacob, fueled by their unwavering faith and sheer terror, managed to escape the clutches of the possessed villagers, fleeing into the dark woods that surrounded the accursed village. Deep in the heart of the dark and foreboding woods, Edward and Jacob stumbled through the underbrush, their breaths ragged and their hearts pounding with fear. They had narrowly escaped the possessed villagers, but the horrors they had witnessed continued to haunt their minds. As they ventured deeper into the wilderness, exhaustion and despair threatened to overwhelm them. They had lost their beloved Gabriel, and the village they had sought refuge in had become a nightmare beyond imagination. But they couldn't turn back. The evil that had befallen the village was relentless, and they had to find answers. After what felt like hours of wandering through the dense woods, they stumbled upon a faint glimmer of light in the distance. With a renewed sense of hope, they pushed forward, following the feeble beacon. The light led them to the outskirts of another village, one that seemed peaceful and untouched by the malevolent forces that had consumed their previous home. As they approached, cautious but hopeful, the villagers of the new village welcomed them with open arms. Edward and Jacob recounted their harrowing tale of the village they had fled, hoping for some understanding or guidance. But to their astonishment, the villagers looked at them in bewilderment. According to the villagers, the village they spoke of had been raided and destroyed by marauders many years ago. There had been no life there for decades, and the horrors they described seemed like the fevered imaginings of madmen. Edward and Jacob exchanged bewildered glances. Had they truly been living in a ghost town? Were the terrors they had experienced the result of their grief-stricken minds? Doubt gnawed at their sanity. With the courage they had left, they made a difficult decision. They would return to the village they had fled, not only to confront the inexplicable horrors, but also to give their dear Gabriel a proper Christian burial. They owed him that much. As they approached the village once more, their hearts sank. The town was indeed in ruins, and nothing was as they remembered it. Buildings lay in disrepair, and the streets were overgrown with weeds. Every building still was placed on the same location, the fish stall located on the same corner of the street. Even their own home were standing where it was supposed to stand, but everything was in ruins. But what was more unsettling was the complete absence of any signs of life. None of the villagers they had known remained. There were no sign of any life in the town at all. Not even the wildlife has left a mark on the town. They made their way to the butcher's shop, where the tragic loss of Edward's son had occurred. That building was not in the condition both of them had remembered, just like the rest of the town. Edward ran around the abandoned building, desperately searching for his deceased son. He had to be there, buried under the rubble. There was only one sign of the deceased son at the butcher's fallen store, a sign that haunted the remaining family for the rest of their time. Gabriel's Bible had been placed on the porch of the store, fully intact, without a mark or even a sign of dust on it. And on the book, there was a note that had one simple message. On it was written, "Life is a scale. If you want to live your life in good, you also need to live your life in despair."